development programs often limit the tools in their toolbox to a few instructional strategies, whereas KM programs likely discourage the use of duplicate or contradicting product features available in those learning management systems. So when we think about the ecosystem, it is learner-centric. So the learner is at the center of all of it. So knowledge management is just one of these pillars or elements that can help feed a learning experience. So as KMers, I challenge us to think a little bit zoomed out or higher level on thinking about what we can contribute to instead of thinking of our audience as users or platform audience, clients, customers, whatever you call your end user. Think of them as learners, and if we're able to think of them as learners, we can start to expand into some of the other parts of the ecosystem, which include performance support, the structured learning, talent management, social and collaborative learning opportunities, and access to experts. So some examples that I want to provide you, and you can continue to read through the slide here, is structured learning such as formal self-paced e-learning modules, social learning via facilitated communities of practice, KM strategies which improve learner ability to create their own learning paths and find additional learning assets to follow that path. So while we always put the learner at the center of those training program recommendations, we will ground our approach with desired business objectives as well. So I want to start by providing a list of terms that if you're here at KMWorld, may be less familiar with you if you are not typically in the learning environment. So these are some day-to-day terms that may be seen in the development of objectives, or let's think of the KPIs that may be tethered to a learning program. So now this might be your comfort zone. These are some of the things that we look for in our knowledge management program. So maybe you can think of what's going to come in this hexagon next. But these are some things that both learning and knowledge management can be striving for in one collected integrated experience. So some of the things that we looked for in that common terminology are things like peer connections, access to SMEs, communities of practice, and I'll let you all read the rest here. I'm going to pass it over to Lauren here to kind of share a little bit about what's happening in our industry within this space of learning and knowledge management.
Yeah, I think Taylor's point is exactly right. What does this all practically come out to? I think we all know this, we've all felt it, that there's just a wide swath of knowledge happening across many applications and many SMEs, many different brains across different locations today. So we're just losing track of knowledge within our organizations, plain and simple. It's really costly and hard as a business to find and curate the content and high quality content. Again, the SMEs, the best experts, are really just getting hounded on a regular basis to try and find that information or be that source of information for everyone. And then especially as we've all moved to that remote or hybrid work, even access to those individuals can become a lot harder. So there's a couple of studies that we reference at Glean pretty heavily. The first is from McKinsey that employees report spending about 20% of every workday just looking for information. So when you add that up, that's actually becomes essentially an entire workday each week spent looking to find that content, to find that information. And then on the other flip side of it, they're also saying that from a study with Asana that they're spending about 6.5 hours a week actually just creating duplicate content. So this problem is getting worse and worse, not just every day or every week, but actually every hour. As new people are looking for new content and just creating duplicative work, you're seeing a real double down on the business impact. So let's talk a little bit about what that then results into, the need.
So now that we've set the stage for you, we've kind of given you a bit of language that is seen in the learning environment and then in the KM environment. We want to give you a real life example of what this looks like and how Lauren and my journey came together. So let's go through this use case. So think there was a client that has knowledge assets, training materials, and job aids in multiple systems, but no current method of providing a single holistic view and searching across all systems. So I'm curious, by show of hands, is anybody dealing with a similar experience? Okay, I'm sorry. I'm hoping that we can give you some tools to help mediate that. Another thing here is the relationships between the content and different systems. It has great value. The writers and content authors knew that there was value, but it was currently hard to view and to communicate with one another. So here are 4 of the things on the high-level wish list for the client in mind. So offering a first-class search experience, making it easier to find specific content or discover new content. Next, allows secure, simplified knowledge sharing and reuse while simultaneously providing enterprise-level view of your knowledge assets. So for both learning and KM teams, regardless of which team you're on or if you're in a combined effort, having legal and security teams on your good side is definitely a bonus for future and sustainable programs. Next, providing highly customized solution offerings, personalized experiences. So, we were trying to step away from a portal that was a one-size-fit-all experience. This is really the trend in the learning space, and we're seeing that in enterprise search solutions as well, making sure that it's customized by role or by the persona that we're developing it for. And lastly on our wish list was to support delivering content in proper context by seamlessly connecting structured and unstructured data to form one continuous learning experience. And so speaking about a learning experience, I want to take a moment, just hopefully an educational opportunity. If you all know the difference between these, you can take the moment to multitask, and then we'll get back on track with our storytelling. So a learning management system is a much more structured and a much more robust experience that can provide and deliver defined curriculum. It's a tool that is typically used within a closed system, and it can be integrated into a learner experience or an integrated experience. However, it's typically best used around compliance and businesses that do have certain performance requirements to meet for their staff. Now, for this client, the goal was to create a learning experience platform. So let me share here, a learning experience platform is, rather than being one closed system, as you can imagine, it is an experience that provides learning personalization and customization capabilities through self-publishing, content indexing and discovery, recommendations, pathing, skill mapping, and usage analytics. So the reason that I bring this up is because for this particular use case, because we were going after a learning experience platform, I believe that is what allowed us to use an enterprise search tool for both knowledge and learning management needs. If the customer, the client, needed an LMS experience, this is a solution that would not have been a good fit. So I want to distinguish, you may want to be sure which path is going to be best for your use case. So let's take a moment to distinguish the difference between the two, pause, and make a decision on which experience is best for your learners and your use case. So because of that, we were able to explore a learning experience platform, and that's where the fun comes with uncovering the solution.
So if you haven't figured it out yet, we're building up to Glean being the solution in this situation. So I'll talk a little bit about just what goes into Glean and really creating that continuous learning experience. So Glean is a purpose-built AI platform for enterprise search, but really for that knowledge discovery. And so we start with all the applications in your tech stack. Like I just mentioned, that list is growing rapidly. I think you could also add on here those SMEs, that institutional knowledge that lives within people's brains, within their meetings and live conversations. There's then the governance engine, and so for us, security is an incredibly important part of the platform. Like Taylor said, you want to have the legal, the security, the compliance teams absolutely on your side, especially when you're talking about all of the knowledge within your organization. And so we'll talk about it in a second, but Glean really delivers personalized results to each individual's allowed knowledge access within your organization. And then there's the knowledge graph, right? This is something you're all very familiar with, probably much more familiar with than I am. But a lot of times we think of that in the old school version of you have to go in and tag and create and actually manually design a knowledge graph. What Glean and tools similar to us do is just take the content that already lives today and look at all of the different factors that go into it. Who created it? When was it created? Where does it live? What is the activity with it? We have a term that we use really heavily called frequency. What's the frequency and recency that pieces of content are referenced within your organization? So we take all of that into consideration. And then we do apply this adaptive and, again, personalized AI experience where we're using generative AI. So we've been using AI for many years, but obviously things have changed recently, so more of that. We're then using semantic understanding, some of that LLM that you've been hearing about from a lot of other presentations. And then just looking at, again, your knowledge is the basis of everything that the platform is looking at. And so what your employees are going to get is that really, really personalized, customized experience for each search or each query of their choosing that they're looking to find the answers to. So they're going to get that really personalized experience kind of all the way up from the applications in the tech stack to their specific needs. And if you all have ever tried to do a screen share or a demo, you know that it doesn't work when you try to do it. So that's what we're running into right now. So there is a lovely little video. It'll work for you if you go find the presentation as it gets sent to you. But again, I can just talk a little bit about Glean and our history. So our founding CEO was one of the first search engineers at Google. And became a distinguished engineer there. And then he went on to found a security company. We do take it very seriously, and was the CTO there. And he kept hearing, I'm not learning, I can't find the information I need, I can't find the knowledge that I'm looking for from his employees. And he realized that he's one of the few people on the planet uniquely positioned to actually help solve this problem of knowledge spread across the organization. So he founded Glean about 5 years ago and started it with a handful of other engineers to solve exactly that problem. So Glean started really as an enterprise search platform. Again, as you've all been hearing about, generative AI and chat is a lot of new functionality. So there is chat functionality with it as well. So how many people have started playing around with ChatGPT? Awesome. Yeah, pretty much everybody at this point. So imagine being able to do that for your organization, where we're not going to look at the entire internet as the source, which is what you're getting with ChatGPT. We're going to look at your enterprise knowledge, your enterprise learnings, to actually help your employees do things like create summarizations, automatically generate answers. I used it today, for example, to summarize posts in a Slack channel where I was trying to understand how many times has this situation occurred in the last quarter. So I simply issue that search or that query into the chat, and it's going to summarize for me those items in a Slack channel that, again, would normally have required me going to a subject matter expert, asking them to put together a full documentation of the situation. So we're starting to use a lot of that new technology to, with all of the things that Taylor's been talking about, increase the learning, increase the knowledge share across your organization. Well, Taylor, I'll let you talk a little bit about the features wish list too.
All right, so let's get into it, kind of chat through, looking at the current state at Noom, the things that were on the wish list when we started to look at our procurement possibilities. If you've ever worked in a tech startup, the ability to buy is a lot better entry point than the ability to build at the pace in which you have to innovate in that space. So I would love to have built these internally to truly customize that. But again, buying a solution was the right fit for this organization and led us to a great journey of doing system demos. So before we went into those demos, these are the things that were on my list. Enterprise search, first and foremost, we had buy-in all the way up to the executive level. This was on our wish list. Within that, we wanted to ensure that there was then also easy access back to the data sources, particularly for that more robust learning content. So if there was an LMS track, or let's say there was a learning opportunity in one of those integrated systems, we wanted people to be able to dive in if that was the zone that they were in during their workflow. Next, we wanted custom connections. So there were some tools that we were using that were not immediately available out of the box. We also had some native content management systems, being that we were a software platform. Next was the ability to collect and organize job aids. So there were hundreds of different there were very small amounts of employee types, so maybe only 4 or 5 employee types. However, there were then hundreds within those employee types. So we wanted to be able to curate and customize those packages and resources that were role specific. Next, we wanted to look for an expertise locator. So people were the best, and I believe in any organization, people are the greatest asset for knowledge. And so that was true here. We wanted to ensure that there was an expertise locator available. And I'll mention there, the side bonus was that information could come directly from our single sign-on and our HRIS. Next were insights for admins. So this was a selfish one. As the senior knowledge manager, I wanted a tool that could help me do my job better. There was so much content. This was a Google Space or Google Workspace organization. I wanted the ability to see not only how many assets I had, I wanted to see adoption, I wanted to see popularity, wanted to see a bit more about content, health, and inventory. So I wanted a system that could give us some more insights around usability and the content health. Next came content recommendations. Now this was, again, a bonus. We wanted to know that if a system didn't already have recommendations, that at the least it was on their roadmap for 2023 at the time. Next came permission-based content access. Again, getting that buy-in from legal and IT security teams at first. This was what was on their wish list. So I'll call that out. We created this list together, so that way I had their buy-in when we went shopping. And so having the permission-based content access was a must for our organization. And lastly, coming back to the learning objectives here, we wanted the ability to crowdsource and in the future be able to have gamification within our system. We wanted to make crowdsourcing, we wanted to make contributing to the knowledge base a fun and a lucrative experience for each personalized employee experience. So here's your drum roll. As you can imagine, we can see how Glean measures up here.
Yeah, I gave it away a little bit before, but a lot of these requests are things that we hear incredibly regularly from our customers and from our prospects. You can see on the left hand, I'm showing you a bit of a little GIF with a search there that's going to pull up, again, that AI-generated answer, but it's also going to pull up all the existing knowledge and content within the organization below. You then have the ability to create collections, so actually group content together regardless of where it lives. And I think for KM, this is one of the most valuable features, is the ability to recognize knowledge on a specific topic, just like we've talked about already, lives across your entire organization. It's not just all in SharePoint or in Slack or Teams or Drive or whatever systems you're using. It's gonna live in up to 50 different places, right? And so we wanna be able to allow you as KM professionals and oftentimes as learning professionals to allow your employees to find that information, again, regardless of where it lives, but understand its relationship to each other. And then we just have a couple more visuals of the chat functionality on the bottom left there, if you're familiar with it. And then interestingly too, that insights for admins, right? It's important for people to be able to see what sort of content is being looked for regularly. It's a little small, so apologies, but the report on the right is actually top searches without a result clicked, which is essentially telling those experts within the organization, people are looking for information and they're potentially not finding it or not finding something adequate for what they're looking for. And so that can go inform where you fill in knowledge gaps, where you fill in other needs, or ask SMEs to step in and do that as well. And now we'll talk a little bit about the implementation.
All right, thank you. If it was this simple, we wouldn't be here today. So I'm just going to put that out there now. If it were as easy as these 4 steps, we would be out of jobs and we wouldn't be doing anything. So I recognize all of that, but just play along. So when you go to figure out what kind of solutions you can look for and implement for both a learning and a KM space, very first foremost, please, we encourage you to take a look around and figure out what your current and target state would be. Knowing where you are so you can know where you want to go after you have implemented the solution is going to be your best way to get that executive buy-in. Next, like we spoke about, and you already saw my wish list, and that was something that we got validation through the organization. So before we started demos, before we started conversations of buy versus build, it was a conversation with executive leadership. So that way, when we did have the aha moment and figured out what was going to be the right solution for the organization, we could then move quickly. That, and speaking of going quickly through tool selection, as you can imagine, there's a room full of your options. So the tool selection itself can be a daunting, or it can be a longer experience, but hopefully because you've already done your validation and requirements list ahead of time, you can hopefully pre-screen before you even get in the room of demos, before you even reach out that you're interested. So you can create a short list, so that way you can save yourself time in demos and also save yourself time in those communications and email threads. And then speaking of fast pace, we then were able to accelerate through a pilot implementation. So that way we're able to test and model, make sure it's going to be the right fit for the organization. So that way we have justification and investment across the board from both SMEs and from executives by the time we get to a full-scale implementation and investment.
I think to Taylor's point, if it was that easy, we would both be out of jobs. Also, a big part of what we do at Glean and what my team does is help all of you, all these people in this room, actually show the output of your efforts to your business. And so we talk a lot about different ways to measure the impact. On the left-hand side, you're going to see the quantitative, and definitely some of it is really specific to us, right? We look at what is the adoption of the Glean platform, what is the net promoter score, so are people enjoying using the system? But we also then start to look at more specific engagements that are really valuable for you as well, things like the queries per user per week. So how often are people in your organization going to look for information? That's a great way to show back the need within your business. Also looking at things like a search satisfaction score. So how often are people getting the result that they're looking for? How often are they finding that piece of information? And then really importantly too, part of Glean is a knowledge hub. And this is where the SMEs or different individuals within your organization can actually start to create content directly there as well. So there's the collections that we talked about before, things like answers as well. So the ability to answer FAQs really quickly. As well as things like Go links, the creation of those quick access links to other content. But we also have things like verification and deprecation. So are people taking responsibility for their content? Are they identifying, this is the latest and greatest? Are they also identifying, hey, this was an old version of something, let's keep it for the knowledge that comes from knowing where we started. But I'm also, as the owner, saying, please don't use this anymore. There's then also looking at things like announcements. Are people talking to each other in kind of larger groups within the platform? And then things like, as much as Glean will identify and find the most relevant pieces of content within your organization, we also recognize at times there's moments where you or others in the organization want to really force a piece of content to be the first item found. And so are people doing that? Again, are people taking ownership over their content and really identifying the needs of the business? And then secondarily, but really important, is that qualitative, right? And you've probably done a lot of these before, but actually just doing surveys for people in your organization, identifying what they can and can't find. A deeper level of that, doing those user interviews. If you haven't invested the time in doing that yet, I definitely would recommend doing that and understanding where people can and can't find the information today, where they want to get more. And then just, are the right foundations for success in place? So again, Taylor mentioned things like connectors to the different applications in your organization. Is there a wide range of that? Are there a lot connected such that people really can have that single pane of glass in one platform and find anything that they might be looking for in that one place? A really fun metric is looking at the usage by department as well, and just seeing what are different departments looking for, how often are they accessing different pieces of information. And then you can kind of flip that and say not by department, by content source. So again, you are all dealing with more applications than ever before today. And you can actually start to go and kind of put a score to how useful those different applications are in terms of surfacing the information that's needed within your organization. So that's kind of flip the department on its head of application. And then just using all the different ways to access, for us, again, specifically Glean. But I would say the bottom one is particularly interesting too, in terms of correlation with other surveys and other tools that you might be doing. One of my favorite questions is this exactly: do you have access to the content you need to do your job? If you don't have a score for that today within your organization, again, highly recommend going and asking that. And then you'll get a sense of just what's the burden on individuals, what's the burden on SMEs to be basically taking the place of what can now be done with tooling. And I think what's really important with all this, though, those we were all talking about are really high level, but it's incredibly, incredibly impactful to actually talk to the functional leaders within your organization, do those user interviews across departments, because what you'll also find is that access to knowledge, access to learning within an organization is measured very differently by department. So for example, if you work at a company with an engineering team, they're looking at things like increased time in code, right? If I'm an engineer and I'm having to constantly leave our code tool to go ask questions, I'm not being as effective as possible. Or for your new hires, the time to first code commit, or time to bug resolution, right? Those are all really impactful metrics that your engineering team, I guarantee you, is looking at today. And you could go have a really large impact on that and really help the business. Then for things like the sales, my team, customer success, support, same things like the ability to get a 360-degree view of all of your customers. Same sort of thing, the ability to respond to and hit SLAs for support tickets really quickly. The ability for a sales team member to actually answer questions on a call with a prospect rather than having to send follow-up emails. We've talked to some customers that, and I don't think everybody does this, but they actually started to track the number of follow-up emails that had to be sent versus just next meeting getting scheduled because questions were answered on the call. So I do, while we talked about, and you'll see there are definitely still company-wide ones, right? Time to onboard, questions and things like help HR channels, help IT channels. It is really, really impactful to talk to those functional leaders within the organization because they are talking about productivity within their team in really different ways. And those are a lot of the metrics that you can go directly impact and then show your value and the efforts of your teams to the larger business.
Great. I hope you're all able to digest some of those metrics because, one of the themes I've heard since getting here earlier this week is just how we are all continuously getting challenged with the ability to justify and validate the value of our work and how to communicate with leaders in that space. So, before we go into key takeaways here and Q&A time, I want to kind of come full circle with this concept of the learner ecosystem. So Laura and I actually met here last year at KMWorld, and even on top of that, we both attended the session last year on how learning and knowledge management are peanut butter and jelly. And it was like this aha moment for us last year on, I was like, okay, my KM budget might not be enough to buy the best-in-class enterprise search, let alone build it. We definitely didn't have the budget to build it. And so it gave me the power, it gave me the authority to go and speak to the learning team and say, hey, look at what we could unlock together. So that way we were able to come to a decision, go shopping together for the right solution. So that way we were able to both unlock our goals together. So that way we were both able to invest, collectively combine our budget. And you can imagine leadership's excitement when we come to them and say, hey, we actually want to buy one tool instead of two, and we would like to use it to move us forward in both of our quarterly goals. So again, we were able to, thankfully, thanks KMWorld, it's a free promo here, but coming last year gave me some of the tools I needed to speak the same language with the learning team, so that way we could then go on this journey together for KM and learning. We were then able to compare our needs and our goals. So we were able to look at our track record of what we had accomplished thus far, and we were looking for opportunities that we could then join in and meet those use cases and functional requirements collectively. And then, again, we went on that journey together. So the head, we're sorry that Rebecca Scales couldn't join us today, our head of technical learning and development. We went on the journey together. So she had that use case for the technical learning program while I had the use case of our knowledge management program. We went on the journey together, met Lauren along the way. And then once we did uncover that, that's when we had our piloting opportunities, and leadership was able to see, we gave them admin seats so they could look at the insights for themselves at any moment they were interested. We were able to show those metrics for both enterprise learning and knowledge management. So we want to leave you here with this, kind of high-level takeaway that if you're able to kind of speak the same language, compare needs and goals, uncover the solution together, and show the results, you can use that to realize the potential of KM technologies to advance cross-functional objectives within one learner ecosystem. All right, so now's where we get to the fun part where we hear from you all. I think we're both tired of talking at this point. We want to hear from you all, and then we'll tell you what these you all are so brave. You're just scanning QR codes without even knowing. Impressive. So we'll talk about this, but we want to hear from you all before we finish out with these QR codes. Any questions? Yeah.
Sure. Question. So I totally get the content learning use case. I wonder if you could talk about how well more traditional learning objects work in this ecosystem, like self-paced training courses.
Do you want to talk about content types?
Yeah, okay. I'll do that. So I do think, to be totally fair, what Taylor mentioned earlier is, Glean is not an LMS. It's not going to, a SCORM packet is not going to live in there. And in general, that's the basis of Glean. We're not storing really anything. The idea is that content lives in these different places, and then we're just helping surface it and find it. So if you do have a more traditional LMS platform, odds are we can connect to it, and then that would be something that a team member could search for. And they won't have to remember, does it live in this tool, or was there a link somewhere over here? They can just search for it in that one place and bring it up. And it will take you to the source application. So if I search for something and then click on it, it's going to take me into the source application. We're not trying to take over all the platforms. We recognize that the tool sprawl is here to stay. Does that help clarify a little bit?
Yeah, it does. So it actually could sit side by side with the traditional LMS.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have many customers that are doing that today where, exactly, yeah, as a team member, it's really about that access point in a lot of ways, right? Again, we recognize that the tool sprawl is here. It's not going anywhere. As much as we're all cutting tools every day, it's not going to change. And so, yeah, we're just trying to make it that really easy access point where, as an employee, I don't have to remember where to go to access something or who posted it in whatever messaging tool or whatever email I got. You can just search for it and find it in one place. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Dependent, but yes. So we have a growing, pretty large growing APAC region. So we support a number of languages in the APAC region is where we're starting today. But yeah, we can talk more after too. Yeah, I mean, absolutely right. Correlation, causation, whole discussion. And what I'll say, and leading the customer success team, I maybe shouldn't totally say this, but we're not going to try to take credit for all of a sudden your sales numbers go up, right? I think it's important for us to be realistic about how much it is impacting it. But I do think that idea of combining quantitative and qualitative is a really good way to make that proof point. So we do have a lot of customers where they've done exactly that, where they've, for example, been able to show things like a quantitative change in a productivity metric that a manager is tracking. And then also with a survey, have folks saying things like, I can get to this so much faster, or I use Glean for XYZ things. So combining those two does help to tell that story. But I think it's important to be realistic about how much any platform is going to be able to really directly impact a workflow that's in a different system. Yeah. Yeah.
You talked more than once, you referred more than once about the cost of the fuel versus the cost of time.
Yeah.
Ignoring cost apart, in the solution, what would you like to have that you still?
Oh, yeah, sure. That's a good question.
put Glean on the hot seat here, see what I hope for their 2024 roadmap. She's taking notes too. I think speaking about, global content or how to support global teams, I would love it if there were some fast integrations around content translation, not necessarily for that to be customer facing, but for internal uses, for somebody where maybe English is a second language. I think it would be really helpful for there to be that Google translation or that quick button to say, hey, let me see this in my native language. It's not going to be perfect, but at least enough to potentially overcome any language barriers there. So that's just one idea that comes to mind that's been on, she's taking notes, yep. The other thing that might be on my mind right now is I think that gamification. It is something that's on my mind because I do think there is an opportunity for Glean to continue on this path of making it so we are engaging with the users of that product. So if there are badges or if there's some way that we can celebrate and have places in which the knowledge champions and the highest contributors, hey, guess what? Your content's #1 of the week in popularity. I would love to see that kind of gamification, so that way it really helps blend the learning and the KM ecosystem, so that way it is, kind of bolstering that knowledge sharing culture. So those are my top 2 right now. And I think you had a question?
You talked about the importance of KM and then speaking the same language. Can you talk a little bit more about that with some examples of something? I sort of get it, but
Sure, absolutely. So one comes to mind is let's talk about maybe the tooling around a learning content management system, so an LCMS. When I was a knowledge manager looking for knowledge management platforms, building upon content management systems, I couldn't quite wrap my head around what was the distinction, what is the differentiator of an LCMS, and what are the values or benefits of that kind of product. So I actually not only met with some of those teams, but sat down with the instructional designers, started to speak with learning, leadership, so that way I could understand their why for why having a LCMS is, valuable depending on the maturity and how robust their content might be. So that was an opportunity for me to learn that it was it was a need for that organization to have both, as opposed to combining. As much as we love to think, like we're talking about tool, can we cut tools? Can we integrate tools? Can we combine and get one instead? There are going to be use cases where the audience experience would be at risk if we merge or blend too much. So that's just one example. Yeah, I think, how are we doing on time? Okay, great. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good question. What's really important for us at Glean is meeting people where they're at. So without getting too into it, fundamentally Glean in its best form is a browser extension. And then you can access it in a number of different ways. So you can pull up a new tab and the search will be there. There's a side search bar as well. So let's say you're on the sales team, you're in Salesforce talking to a prospect and you need to pull up more information. It's a quick keyboard shortcut to pull that up and get the full search experience on whatever screen you're already on. There's also a Slack bot where folks can ask questions or pull up content directly in Slack. So it's really high. We did some recent, or I should say our investors did some recent studies into the rate of usage. And Glean is actually on par with a lot of the social media platforms that we all know and love, which is pretty rare for a SaaS platform in the workplace. So people are using it at a really high rate, but it's really about meeting people where they're at. I don't want to leave, if I'm in the middle of building a deck, I don't want to leave that to have to go find something. So I use that side search bar on a really regular basis. And then the Slack bot, to the question about how you actually prove the value as well. The Slack bot is a really good one for things like those HR questions or IT questions, or those we'll use the sales team example as well, for a sales engineer who's often getting just question after question after question. Glean can actually proactively answer those as well. So we can actually show the number of questions where a human used to have to answer it compared to Glean's institutional knowledge automatically answering and getting that question done without that human intervention. So that's one where we can really show the quantitative of previous effort compared to newer effort. I think I saw one more.
Let's take one more.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we have one more and then we'll. Oh, yeah,
Sure,
go for it.
So I was likely quite a nuisance to Glean because I actually asked them to turn off the ability to move content during the pilot. One of the things our executive leadership team was most weary about is another place for content to live. And I was like, great, let's prove that out. We turned that functionality off to prove the value of all of the other product features and that it was creating a landing portal or a landing page for that customized experience to find, discover, and add content without adding another source of truth. Once we gained trust and we were able to kind of upskill the staff on when are going to be the right times to create new content in Glean, because there is an Q&A answer, functionality. We gave it to a select group of SMEs, so that way we still had control over the amount of content that went in. At the time, I guess I'll give you like a 6-month status update on how much content was there at the time. We had less than 12 collections of native Glean content, and it was less than 200 articles, so it was still maintained. So we know we're right here at time. So let me explain our QR code here. I did give you that very high level wishful thinking roadmap of where to start, how to get to somewhere where you're implementing a tool like Glean. We want to give you the ability to talk to us and meet with us together. We work for 2 different organizations, so it can be hard to know where to go, what to do next. So as your action step, we actually have a self-assessment that you all can take, so that way we can then start a discussion of what's going to be on your wish list, what kind of systems or tools are going to be best fit for your organizations, and it could be buy, it could be build, it could include Glean, it could include EK, but at the end of the day, it's just a way for you all to start a conversation with us. So we'd like to leave you with that, and thank you for coming.